Guys, I finally was able to make a video of me in front of the whiteboard so you actually see me teach in front of a whiteboard. And I know I've got glasses on now, but that's because I wear contacts all day at work, and by the time I get home my eyes are pretty dry, so I'm wearing glasses for you guys. So today we're going to talk about how to solve multi-step equations and inequalities. So this is going to be 3 different videos. You really only have to watch the inequality one because you solve equations the exact same way that you do inequalities, but inequalities has kind of one more step. So if you can solve inequalities, you can solve just equations. But this one is going to be kind of a remedial one. So starting back at the beginning, like what you guys did in 8th grade math, to solve basic algebraic equations. And these are just simple 1-step and 2-step equations in this video. The next video will cover multi-step equations, and then the last video will cover multi-step inequalities, unless I manage to fit equations and inequalities all together in one. So to start off with, you need to understand the difference between expressions and equations. So last week we did expressions, which look like this. So something like this, you would simplify it to solve, but in order to make it into equation has the word equal in it, or a derivative of it. So in order to do it, you just set an equal sign and make it equal to something. And now you've got an equation. So that's kind of the difference between an equation and an expression. So today we're going to go over just basic 1 and 2 steps in this video, and then in the next video we'll cover more advanced stuff. So one of the number 1 rules that you need to remember about solving equations is anytime you move something to the other side of an equal sign, you must always do the opposite of what's being done. So I'm going to write the number 1 rule on the board. So up here I've written your number 1 rule. It says always do the opposite operation being done to the x and do it to both sides. Do not forget to do it to both sides. A lot of people get it to go away and they're all excited and they forget to do it to the other side, which will give you the wrong answer. So always do it to both sides. So I'm going to write up here 4 different equations that we're going to go over. These are simple 1-step equations. You do 1 operation and you're done. Alright, here are the 4 equations that we're going to go over. So first we have x plus 2 equals 4. Whenever you have your equal sign, draw a line down it, and that will show you both sides that we're working with. And you want to see what is being done to the x. So 2 is being added to the x. So you want to do the opposite of adding, which would be subtracting 2 to both sides. So subtract 2 from both sides. 2 minus 2 gives you 0. So those cancel out. Bring your x down. And then 4 minus 2 is 2. Next we have x minus 2 equals 4. What's being done to the x is minus 2. So we want to do the opposite, which is plus 2 to both sides. And minus 2 plus 2 gives me 0, which is what we want to happen. We want nothing over here with the x. So those cancel. X is equal to 4 plus 2 is 6. On this one, the 2 is being multiplied by the x. Anytime that you have 2x, that means 2 times x. So if it's being multiplied, the opposite would be divide 2 on both sides. So we're going to divide this side by 2 and divide this side by 2. 2 over 2 just gives you a 1, and 1x is just x. 4 divided by 2 is 2. On this side, we have x divided by 2. I know this looks a little scary because you see this and you think fraction, but in algebra, fractions just mean division. So this is x divided by 2. The opposite is multiply, so multiply 2 to both sides. So times 2 times 2. So when we do 2 times this x over 2, it's like saying 2 times a half, which half of 2 is 1. So this turns into just 1x, or x. And then 4 times 2 is 8. And that's how we do one step. So it's just a simple, you're going to do one thing and you're done. Now I'm going to show you two-step equations where you have to multiply it or divide as well as add or subtract. So give me a minute to write that up here. All right, so these are two-step equations. They have something multiplied or divided to the x, and they have an addition or a subtraction also. So we're going to have to do two separate things. Anytime that you see equations, you kind of do almost backwards PEMDAS. So we're going to add or subtract first rather than deal with parentheses or anything like that first. So the first step is to add or subtract something away from the x. So in this equation, what is being added or subtracted to the x already? So 4 is being added to my x. We always do the opposite, which means subtract, and we do it to both sides. So we're going to subtract 4 to both sides. Our 2x we didn't do anything to, so we'll just bring it down. Plus 4 minus 4 gives you 0, so they cancel. So we're just going to bring this 2x down. And then 6 minus 4 is 2. So now we've got 2 times the x. So to make that go away, we want to do the opposite. But let's add to our next step. We always do our multiplying or dividing next. So we've got multiply or divide away from the x. And 2 is being multiplied by x, so the opposite is dividing 2 on both sides. So 2 divided by 2 is just the number 1. And 1x is just x. And again, 2 divided by 2 is the number 1. And that's our answer to that one. We're going to solve this one the same way. So the first thing we want to do is add or subtract something away from the x. So 4 is being subtracted from my x. We want to do the opposite, which is add 4 to both sides. Negative 4 and plus 4 give you 0, so they cancel. Bring down your x over 2. And then 6 plus 4 is 10. And then you want to multiply or divide something away from the x. 2 is being divided by that x, so we want to multiply, do the opposite, multiply 2 from both sides. So 2 times x over 2 is just like before. It's like 2 times 1/2, which ends up giving us the number 1. So these cancel because they give me 1x, which is just x. And then 10 times 2 is 20. And that's our answer. So next up, I want to start by doing some multi-step equations. So in your next video, if you want to watch that one next, it will go over multi-step equations and how scary they can be and how to break them down and make them a little bit less scary.